besties, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so happy that we are now going into the springtime. Spring is one of my favorite seasons because the weather starts to get warmer, the flowers start to bloom. My birthday is also in the spring, and just generally I love reading when it's warm outside. And so I'm really excited to get to talk to you guys about some of my spring book recommendations and then also my spring TBR. I've been doing these seasonal book recommendations videos for almost a year now, and I don't actually think I've ever done one for spring. And I'm also mixing it up because I don't normally talk about my TBR in these videos. So if you guys are interested in hearing about what books are on my radar for the spring, be sure to stick around for the end of this video. But I think that's it for this introduction. So let's talk about all of my spring book recommendations. I'm literally so excited. The first book that I had to talk about in this video was Ready or Not by Cara Bastone, because look at that cover. But in this book, we're following our main character, Eve, and she's living in New York City. And one night she goes out on the town with her best friend, and she ends up having a one-night stand, which is pretty out of character for Eve, I would say. And she realizes a few weeks later that she got pregnant from that one-night stand. And she goes to try and reconnect with the father of her future child, but it turns out that he's pretty unavailable. And so she ends up deciding that she's just gonna do this on her own with the help of her best friend and her best friend's brother, Shep. And let's just say that her best friend's brother ends up taking a bigger role in this pregnancy than maybe he had intended. I love this book for spring because in addition to having all these light, fun, comedic rom-com type moments, there's also a lot of depth woven into this book. I feel like Cara Bastone does a really great job, and those are just things that I love to read about during the springtime. And so yeah, highly recommend checking this one out if you guys haven't already. Book number 2 is The Wedding People by Alison Espach. I read this towards the end of 2025, and I think this would be the perfect book to pick up in either the springtime or even the summertime if you guys don't get to it right away. But in this book, we're following our main character, Phoebe, and she has gone on a trip to this hotel in Newport, Rhode Island, and she's there to complete a very specific plan. But when she gets there, she realizes that she's the only guest staying at this hotel who's not a part of this wedding that's getting hosted at that hotel that weekend. And while she's there, she ends up connecting with the bride, who's obviously getting married, and they strike up a very unconventional friendship, I would say. I will say with this book and all books is to check trigger warnings. There are some very heavy topics that we deal with in this book, but I feel like the descriptions of Newport, Rhode Island and this hotel that's on the coast where this beautiful wedding is taking place feels extremely springy to me. Like there's beautiful grass and the ocean and the flowers, and I definitely associate weddings with the springtime. Like I feel like it's a very popular time of year to get married. I think this would be the perfect book to pick up this spring. Back into the romance genre, we have Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. And I'm realizing this now, but when I planned this video, I didn't intend to recommend 2 accidental pregnancy books, but these are like my 2 favorite accidental pregnancy trope books. In this book, we have our female main character, Wynn, and she, at the very start of our book, goes to a party at her best friend's house and ends up having another one-night stand at this party, and literally exact same situation. She realizes a few weeks later that she is pregnant. But in this book, she ends up contacting Beau, the father of her child, and they end up agreeing to co-parent the child that they are about to have. And through this friendship and agreement that they have, Wynn and Beau end up falling in love with each other. And I absolutely love this story for so many different reasons. I feel like the disability representation in this book is absolutely incredible. I feel like Hannah Bonham Young's ability to really dive into the truths of pregnancy and how difficult that can be on a woman are really present in this book. And yeah, I just absolutely love it. I know that these books sound very, very similar, but I guarantee you after the first like 50 pages, they become very, very different from each other. So yeah, these are great, perfect springtime reads. Up next, I wanted to talk about Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. And this is a YA fantasy book. And in the story, we have 2 main characters. First, we have Jace, whose father is essentially the leader, the king of the lands that they live in. And at the beginning of this book, Jace's father passes away, and so Jace has to step up to become the new leader of these lands. That's happening in one part of the world. And then in another part of our world, we had Kazi, who she was a very renowned street thief, I guess you would say, and she got so good at being a street thief that the queen recognized her and ends up recruiting her to work for her. And so all that we really know at the beginning of this book is that Kazi, among a few other people that work for the queen, are going on some kind of mission to these lands where Jace is now the leader. And the reason I wanted to recommend this fantasy book for the springtime specifically is because there's not a lot of world building or complicated things that happen in here that are difficult to grasp. I feel like of all fantasies that I've read, this one is very easy to just pick up, read it, have a good time. It's not too complicated. Your brain doesn't have to do a ton of work. Also, there's a bit of an enemies to lovers plotline in this book, which I really, really enjoyed. There's a bit of forced proximity in here. The magic is very, very light. Do not go into this book for a lot of magic. And yeah, I just feel like this would be such a great series to read in the springtime. I actually have not finished the second book yet, and I'm realizing now that I didn't put that on my spring TBR, but I would love to finish this series in the spring. Book number 5 is Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. In this book, we have our main character, Cyrus, and he is an Iranian immigrant living in the Midwest somewhere. I don't actually remember where specifically. His father was a farm worker and his mother passed away in a very tragic plane accident. And at the beginning of this book, we have Cyrus, who's struggling with a lot of different, very intense things. He's struggling with addiction and alcoholism and depression and anxiety and all these very, very difficult things. But we know from the beginning of this book that Cyrus is also obsessed with poetry. Like, poetry is something that's a really bright spot in his life. It brings him a lot of joy. He ends up becoming very obsessed with this idea of martyrdom and like what it means to be a martyr. And so he wants to explore what that means through his poetry, through his writing. And he ends up going on a bit of an adventure, a journey to New York City with his best friend to uncover what being a martyr really means. I think for me, when I picked up this book, it had a bit of a slow build in the beginning. I wasn't super obsessed with it, or I wasn't super locked into it. But there was a moment that happened that I didn't even realize that happened, where all of a sudden I was so invested in this book and it became such a page turner in the last 50%. And I just remember sitting outside in the sun being with Cyrus as he tries to uncover these different things. I won't say what they are, obviously. And I just loved it. And I think you could pick this book up at any time of year. I'm realizing, again, as I say this, that since I read this in the spring, it was fantastic. You guys should absolutely pick this book up. It's a great fiction book in general. And I think the springtime is as good a time as any to pick it up. Book number 6 is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. This is a book I equally could have put in a summer book recommendations video, because this book takes place on an island called Little Crescent, and it's very like beachy and warm and just like descriptions of the sun and the ocean. But this isn't necessarily like a poolside rom-com fly through it type of book. Like, I feel like the content in my mind is very spring, because the book is very equally divided between romance, mystery, and fiction. To me, the darker winter months are the times when I read like high fantasies. I read classics, thrillers, that type of genre. And in the summertime, I love to read rom-coms, breezy books that I can just fly through, read by the pool. And so when I'm thinking about spring books, I'm like, what books have elements of everything? And to me, this book very much checks that box. And in this book, we have our two main characters, Alex and Hayden, and both of them have been asked to write the biography of this woman named Margaret Ives. And Margaret Ives was once a very famous individual, but since her youth, she has become a bit of a recluse and has not been in the public eye for many, many years. Alice and Hayden are really excited to get the opportunity to write this biography, but when they get to Margaret's home, they realize that it's actually a competition, and Margaret is going to choose one of them to write her book. So yeah, they have different backgrounds and different experiences, and so it's a fun like competition, but there's also a huge part of this book that's understanding Margaret and her history. And I don't know, I just feel like this would be such a great book to pick up in the springtime, particularly an Emily Henry book to read in the springtime. This book also came out last spring, so you guys might be noticing a little bit of a theme there, but I think the spring would be the perfect time to pick up this book, and it's lovely. Book number 7, if you guys are looking for something a little bit different, we have Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. This is a memoir talking about what it really means to love others and love yourself. I feel like oftentimes memoirs can border on being a little bit too intense for these lighter, happier times of year. Again, this is so subjective and I get that, but that's really how I see the spring and the summertime. And so this is a memoir that I feel like has a lot of beauty without being too intense. Don't get me wrong, there are some very challenging things that Dolly Alderton, our author, went through and that are described in this book, but I just feel like at the end of the day, it was very feel good, and like I loved watching someone grow up and understand how love can be so many different things. Like the messaging felt very positive, and I feel like that is a reason that I want to recommend this book to you guys. Also, if you are in your 20s, like early, mid, late 20s, even early 30s, I bet this is such a great book to pick up. And so I feel like while I'm in my 20s, I feel this sense of urgency to be like, everybody read this so we can talk about it. Yeah, this one's great. Book number 8 is The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I have not talked about this book on my channel in years, but look at that cover. This is another one where I'm like, this cover screams, absolutely screams springtime. The contents of the book I feel like perfectly match up with that. Our main character, her name is Hannah, and she works as a bodyguard, and she gets hired for this very high profile job working as a bodyguard for Jack Stapleton, who is a very famous, I don't remember if he's a singer or an actor, but she needs to be his bodyguard because he has a bit of a stalker situation going on. But the whole issue is he needs to go home to see his family because something is going on with his mom. He doesn't want his mom to know, A, that there's a stalker, and B, that he needs a bodyguard. So he has to fake date his bodyguard, Hannah, and it makes for a very interesting and a very unique plot. And I just generally really loved this book, and it's very light, it's very happy, there's no spice. Also, this is a closed door romance, and I just think it's the perfect book to pick up during the springtime. The next book that I want to talk about in this video is The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abi Dare. The contents of this book are very sad and very dark. I feel like that is the first thing to preface when talking about this book, because I do feel like throughout most of this video, I have tried to push generally books that are on the lighter side, not the lightest, but the lighter side. And this is not that kind of book. In this story, we are following our main character, Aduni, and she is a young 14-year-old girl living in Nigeria. And her family, her father is very poor, and his last chance basically of having money is by selling Aduni to be the wife of a man in their village. And so she ends up being like his third wife. And Aduni has one dream in life, and that dream is to get an education. That is all that she desires. And something ends up happening where Aduni is able to escape her situation and ends up being a servant for this wealthy family in Lagos. And in this new situation, the idea of an education does not become likely, but it becomes possible. And I absolutely love this book. It really deeply affected me and made me feel every range of emotion. There were times when I felt so happy. There were times that I felt so angry and frustrated. And there were times that I felt very uncomfortable. Like everything that I think you can feel, I did feel while reading this book. But the reason that I am recommending it for the springtime is because this book takes place in Africa, obviously. And I feel like the dark topics are very balanced out with like a very hot, warm setting. I do remember reading this and reading descriptions of like the warm air and the river and the grass. And it just felt, the setting felt like springtime, but the contents felt very dark. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed this book. Again, please check trigger warnings and be in a good headspace when you decide to pick up this book if you do. But yeah, this one is great for spring, and honestly might be a little bit too sad for me to pick up in the winter because I think it would just send me down a rabbit hole. Then the final book that I wanted to recommend to you guys during the book recommendations portion of this video before switching into my TBR is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This is another book that I have not talked about in so long. I read this trilogy years and years ago. It's been such a long time, but quite honestly, the descriptions in this book are exactly what I think of spring to be. In this book, we have our main character, Jude, and when she was a very young girl, she watched her parents get murdered in front of her and her two sisters. And then right after this happens, her and her sisters get kidnapped to go to the Fae realm. And so in present day, we're with Jude as she is essentially trying to just like survive and have a decent life as a human being living among the Fae. And the whole world and setting is so like beautiful in my head. Like the bright green grass and the beautiful waters and the Fae are just such gorgeous human beings, and the all the food, it just is so picturesque and so perfect. But the like characters who are living in this world, the Fae particularly, are like very malicious, unkind individuals. And I feel like there's a very interesting comparison that goes on there. And Jude, I found to be a very fiery main character, and I really liked her. And so I just feel like the beauty in the setting of this book makes it perfect for springtime. This is also another one where it's not super labor intensive on your brain when you're reading it. And I do feel like that's what I prefer in a fantasy in the spring. Again, I like to save my high fantasy, intense fantasy books for the fall and the winter time personally. And so these are just great YA fantasies that I feel like you can fly through in the springtime. These are really fun. Those are all of the book recommendations that I had prepared for the springtime. And before I transition into my spring TBR, I wanted to share with you guys one way that I think is really great to figure out what books you want to read in the upcoming season. I run a mail club for readers where I send my subscribers physical letters in the mail every single month. And one of the items that I include in this little package is a newspaper. And on the front page of that newspaper, I completely devote it to books that are coming out that month that I think you should keep on your radar. So this is an example of the newspaper that came out in February to all my subscribers. And so oftentimes these are books that are on my seasonal TBR and my monthly TBR. And so if you guys are interested in literally receiving a bookish newspaper to your mailbox every single month, I always have my mail club linked in the description box. In my mail club, I also include a personal essay on something reading related. I always include a word game or word activity like a word search, a crossword, something like that. And also a cute little bookmark. I have one hiding in my current read right now. This is one that I sent out in February, and it's like vintage and floral and really, really cute. And so if you guys are interested in being a part of my mail club and just being like in the loop of what's going on in the bookish world, I'm going to link that in the description box down below. Now let's talk about my spring TBR, which definitely has a few books that were featured in my newspaper. Book number 1 is How to Write a Love Story by Catherine Walsh. I was through the roof when I saw that this book was coming out because I've read 2 of Catherine Walsh's Christmas romances and absolutely loved them. Like they are 2 just fantastic books that they're not just fantastic because they're holiday romances, like they're just great books. And so I've never read anything from her that's not a Christmas book. And so when I saw that this book was coming out, I was so excited. I know that this has to do with a girl who has to finish her father's like fantasy story. Like he wrote a few books in the series and she needs to write the last one because her father passed away. And like this editor comes out to help her and like they fall in love, and it just sounds like really good. And because it's written by Catherine Walsh, I'm so excited to read this. Book number 2 is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. I feel like this is going to be such a good book to read in the springtime. This is also a book that's on my annual TBR because I told you guys that I want to give YA books a little bit more of a shot this year. I am not always the biggest fan of YA romances in particular. Like I have not really loved one ever, but everyone says that if you're going to love a YA romance, it's probably going to be this one. And I definitely want to get this off of my physical TBR this spring. I don't really know anything about it, and that's okay. It's so viral on the internet that I trust everybody that's recommended this book to me. Number 3 is Glow of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This is book 2 in the Kindred Curse saga. I read Spark of the Everflame very, very recently, and I absolutely loved it. If you guys watched my book slump video that I posted recently, then you guys would know that I absolutely loved this book because it literally got me out of my book slump. And I want to continue this series. I want to continue before I forget things because I tend to start series and then forget about them and not finish it. So I really want to continue making progress in the Glow of the Everflame, or in the Kindred Curse saga series. And I think I could read this any time of year. So definitely that one. Book number 4, this is very poignant and pressing, is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I recently bought this book. The receipt is actually still in it. And this has been on my mental TBR for a while, but the movie is coming out on March 20th or 21st. It's coming out very soon by the time this video goes up, and I am determined to read this book before the movie comes out. I also posted a video on audiobook recommendations, and in the comments, you guys were on me that I need to listen to this book because the audiobook is apparently amazing. And so I'm thinking I'll either listen and physical read or do like immersive reading for this book, but I really want to read this in the spring just because the movie's coming out in the spring. Like, let's be so for real. I don't think this is a very springy book, but I want to compare it to the movie so badly, and I'm really excited. So this one is like for sure I will be reading this before the end of March. Book number 5 is The Night We Met by Abby Jimenez. This is going to be Abby's newest release, and it is the next book in her most recent romance series that she's been writing. I don't know what the series is called. It might just be the Say You'll Remember Me series. I don't know. It's the next book in her romance series. I love her book so much. This one is actually coming out a few days after my birthday, and I've decided that that is the birthday present to myself, is picking up this book. I just absolutely love everything that she writes. It's literally crack. Like, I start her books and I cannot put them down. Like, it's actually physically impossible. And from what I remember about this book, honestly, the blurb on Goodreads kind of confused me a little bit, but basically it's all about how one moment in your life can kind of determine a whole bunch of other things in the future. I don't know. And then there's a romance connected to it. I won't even try to explain it, but I'm really excited to pick up this book. And yeah, it is going to be my birthday present. Book number 6 is Where the Girls Were by Catherine Shates. I don't actually know how to say her name, but this is a fiction book that I featured in my newspaper that I have not heard anyone talk about before, but it just sounds like such an incredible fiction story. We have a main character who everything is like going really well for her. She performs really well in school. She got into Stanford. Like, everything is going good, right? And then she falls for this guy named Wiley and gets pregnant, and her whole life just changes, and she gets shipped off to go live in this community with a bunch of other pregnant girls. I just think it sounds really, really fascinating. And I think it's also technically historical fiction. I think it takes place in the 1970s, if I remember correctly. And so there's obviously like different stressors from that time period that really impact the pregnancy. And so I definitely have this one on my radar. Then we have The Winners by Friedrich Bachmann. I know that this is not spring at all, but I want to finish this series. I am currently reading Us Against You, which is book 2 in the Beartown series. These are like winter hockey books. There's so much more to it than that, but just trust me that they're good. I'm in the middle of the second book right now, and I would just love to finish out this entire series in the spring. I think if I don't get to it, that's okay, because it probably would be a good thing to maybe wait till fall or winter, but I don't want to forget things. And so the quicker that I can get through this book, the better. Number 8 is A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. This is book 2 in the Darker Shades of Magic series. You guys already know this is like my favorite series ever. And I reread the first book in January, I think end of December. And I just want to keep the momentum alive with my reread. This is also a fantasy world that's like a lot of world building, but not the most that I've seen. But it's a world where you love the characters so much. Like, the two main characters, Kel and Lila, are like actually my best friends in my head. Like, I love them so much. And so I feel like I would just be hanging out with my besties in the springtime, in the sun. And it's just perfect. Book number 9 is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This is a book that I've been seeing everywhere, and I know that the book is written through letters. And as someone who absolutely loves letters, I literally send 70 letters to my bookish pen pals all over the world every single month. The idea of reading a book written through letters that this woman is writing to people in her life sounds very, very fascinating to me. And also the fact that it's written through letters makes me feel like it's going to be a quicker paced book just because of the nature of that type of writing. It's kind of piqued my interest. I've seen a few of my favorite creators read this book. I saw it at the bookstore recently, and yeah, I'm very intrigued. So if you guys have read that one, let me know, because I do want to read it. I don't know if it would like be good for spring, but like I feel like it would. I'm intrigued. That's all I can say about it for certain. And then the final book on my spring TBR is Broken Country by Claire Leslie Hall. I put this book on my 10 books to read in 2026 list. I'm trying to hit as many of those as I can at the beginning of this year. And so during a recent book shopping trip, I also picked up this book, same time actually that I picked up Project Hail Mary. Do I really know anything about this book? No. Did I say that the last time I talked about this book? Yeah. It says right here, the farmer is dead. He is dead, and all anyone wants to know is who killed him. So there's some kind of mystery to it. I know there's also some kind of romance to it, and there's fiction involved. And so something about me is I love a genre bend. And when I heard that this book does that, it made me really excited. I will say though, with a genre bend, sometimes I hate it, but like oftentimes I really love it, and there's rarely any in between. And I feel like the fact that I've heard so many great things about this book makes me excited to pick this one up. And also, I feel like that cover is kind of giving spring and fall. So I don't know, I'm excited about this one. Those were all of my spring book recommendations and my spring TBR. As always, if you guys have any books on your radar or books that you want to recommend for this time of year, leave it in the comment section down below. I would love to know. And I'm sure there's a lot of other bookish besties who would love to hear your recommendations. And of course, if you guys are interested in becoming a pen pal with me and getting a fun little newspaper and bookmark about books and all of that kind of stuff, I'm going to leave that linked in my description box down below. And I think that is it for me. So I hope you guys are having the absolute best day and the absolute best reading month, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.